what we're ultimately trying to do at the end of the day is not just drive more clicks, right? Like clicks are a symptom. That's a leading indicator. What we're really trying to accomplish with that is put the right product in front of the right person, and so that they are making a willful decision that they're glad they made at the end of the day. Where I think we have to be cautious is if we don't have the fundamental understanding of that product market match, right? What is that person? What is that product that's going to ultimately fit? You could end up with some optimizations that aren't really optimal.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur. This is a conversation you might appreciate. I caught up with Doug with some work that I was doing with Claritas, my day job as Chief AI Officer. And we had a really interesting conversations about two of the theories that I'm really big fans of. One is Jobs to be Done from Clay Christensen, and the other is The Theory of Constraints by Goldratt, made famous in his book, The Goal. And Doug had some really interesting ways of thinking about AI within that context. And we really haven't had those conversations about how do you practically tackle the opportunities that AI brings into an organization. So I wanted to connect you up with Doug.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that. Listen, I think it's a good point, too, and it certainly will allow us to delve into sort of more company strategy, some marketing strategy conversations today, which I think will be helpful for the audience. So without much further ado, our guest today is Doug McColgin. Let me see.
McColgin.
Doug, McColgin. Our guest today is Doug McColgin, Director of Marketing, Director of Marketing Strategy at UScellular. Hey, Doug.
Hey, how are you guys?
Well, it's great to have you here, Doug. So let's talk. So we've done a little bit of work with AI together, and one of the things that you talked about was that you saw the marketing organizations needing to think more carefully about what jobs to be done they're asking AI to do, and what's their end goal. Share with the audience a bit more about why you brought that up, and what, maybe even start with giving people a good rundown of Christensen's Jobs to be Done and Goldratt's The Goal and Theory of Constraints, and then dive into why you think that that's important to think about those theories from the early days of the internet to today as we're applying the AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting framing. We're talking about two older concepts in light of AI, which is on the bleeding edge and rapidly changing. And I think that's one of the big problems one of the big challenges I think we're seeing today in marketing is how do we bridge this old world of principles and approaches to the new world of technology that's available. Jobs to be Done was a theory that was popularized by Clay Christensen, and at its most basic, the idea is that customers don't buy products or services because they're incrementally better than other products or services that are available, right? Not because it's bigger, it's faster, it's stronger, it's cheaper. People ultimately buy products and services because there's some job that they have in their life, a pain or an aspiration, and they believe that by making the purchase, that job is ultimately going to be completed. On the other side, you asked about the theory of constraints. That's an even older theory, going back to Eli Goldratt. And the basic premise there is that as an organization, we are oriented around a goal at the end of the day. And some actions that we take within our system are ultimately going to serve that goal, and some aren't. The theory of constraints is that we have to look at the system that ultimately produces our output and recognize what is the actual constraint on our ability to achieve that goal, and any effort or investment outside of that constraint ultimately at the end of the day is not going to be productive. And so the reason why I bring the two of those together and why that's been a big part of my processing of AI is it's a really loud space right now. There's a lot of people talking about applications in AI. I would say I'm relatively younger in my journey. Now, granted, not many of us have been involved with AI for many years, being such a new technology. But I'm trying to understand how does this come together within a marketing organization? How do we ultimately use AI to be productive and to further our competitive strategies? And as I've been processing through these things, one of the things I've recognized is at the end of the day, our customers hire us because they have a job for our product or our service. And ultimately, the applications of AI that further that job, make our product or service a better solution to that job, are going to be productive. To the extent that applications make us individually more productive, but don't ultimately help customers at the end of the day, I don't believe those are as productive. And I'm really spending a lot of time thinking about the different applications and making sure that we as an organization are looking at the best possible implementations.
Hey, Doug. So recognizing at some level, I mean, listen, UScellular is about to get sold to T-Mobile, so the whole world, the whole game board is going to be tossed upside down here in a few minutes. So I think though the good news is it allows you to speak freely because you may or may not have control of the message. Based on that, what would you advise either UScellular or any company to kind of do now as it pertains, especially AI and its adoption in the company? Do you have a clarity around sort of what you think? If you were to blue sky that, what do you think you'd want to do?
Well, I think there's two ways to frame. One is going to be now's the time that we need to be getting individuals to be experimenting. Where are the applications on a day in, day out basis? What are the automations? How do we teach non-coders to get more comfortable with using AI to build simple applications and automations? And how do we help folks that are more analytical explorations, more thinkers, start to be realizing that there's another lever that they have at their disposal to start being doers. I think on a broader basis, we've got a full array of partners throughout our MarTech stack. It feels like there's a lot of different companies that are pioneering different applications of AI. And to the extent that we can run experiments and expand partnerships and learn, especially in our situation, there's a great opportunity right now for us to learn about the available tools that are out there to run these different experiments and ultimately get some firsthand knowledge of how to use the technology.
When you're thinking about the jobs to be done and just getting really specific about some of the things that you want AI to do for you in the organization, we've talked about media optimization as one, or the personalization of messages to consumers to match offers and products and motivations for the message. What are some of the other jobs to be done that you're focusing on, or is that media part one of the key ones you're looking at?
Media is a key one. Ultimately, because at the end of the day, again, customers. I'm gonna go back a little bit. We have a solid understanding of the demographics of our customers. We have a really well-defined segmentation, and any given household in the U.S., by working with Claritas, we've been able to have a good sense of who they belong to, what their buying habits are, what their usage habits are, and so on. The only challenge that we run into with the demographic segmentation is it does not provide the clues in the moment to understand why somebody is or is not in the market. I mentioned before we did a jobs to be done study, and what we recognized is there's fundamentally 4 key jobs to be done that customers have that ultimately get them out of bed in the morning and say, I'm going to switch my wireless carrier today. The first one is that they want a better network experience. There's something that they're trying to do on their wireless that they're not able to do today, and they believe by switching, they're suddenly going to have that capability. Could be a coverage gap. It could be increased download speeds. Could be increased upload speeds. It's really going to be unique to the customer. The second job that customers have, which is independent from the first, is going to be more customer experience oriented. I'm working with my current carrier. I've had a challenge with them. I've tried working with them to solve it, and ultimately they're not meeting me where I'm at in providing the solution that I need. So this could be more plan-oriented products, could be truly customer service, retail experience, but within that customer experience bent. The third one is going to be more price-oriented. And it's really not about saving money on wireless. It's about, if I'm not spending $10 a month on my wireless plan, that's $10 a month that I can spend on my whiskey collection. It's $10 a month I can spend on going out to eat. It's $10 a month I can spend on quality time with my kids. And so ultimately, can I free up space in my budget? And then the last one is just natural life change. People get married, people get divorced, and so on. Now, as we look at that from a marketing standpoint, each one of those is going to have triggers that are point-in-time moments. If I'm switching because there's a change, a desire to change in the network, it might be because I dropped a critical call, right? I was on the road driving between places on an important call with my family, and it dropped at a critical moment, and that reflected poorly on me, right? We talked about life change. I just got married, just had a change of address, just got divorced. If we're talking about budget, that might be something that has nothing to do with wireless. Suddenly there is a new impact to my monthly budget, and I'm looking across everything that I have to say, where can I save money? Now, again, I go back to the demographic segmentation. It tells me who I'm talking to. That doesn't tell me why they're shopping. And so to the extent that I'm able to listen to signals, intuit what a customer's job to be done is, and speak to that job to be done, it's a huge opportunity. And that's something that I've been thinking a lot about and looking at ways to pursue.
Interesting. Okay, so in that framework, then you're thinking about how AI can potentially help identify the temporal signals of where somebody's at the moment, and potentially personalize some of the offers and messages to speak to those motivations. If you go past the personalization part, are there things internally within marketing, when you think about the jobs to be done, that you're also looking at in terms of streamlining production, saving time in analysis, or setting up campaigns? What would be some of the internal things that you're looking at AI to do for you?
There is a tremendous amount of just process within marketing today that I see a big opportunity to reduce the non-value added work from an automation standpoint. So one of my teams that I work very closely with is the pricing and promotions team. And just to give you a sense, if you look at pricing today, it's going to require the initial ideation of what are we ultimately offering to customers, and what is the value proposition. But it very quickly becomes an analysis of specific price points, optimizing cost versus volume versus revenue, a lot of back and forth with finance to get approvals, and so on. And every single step across this process is going to be a combination of trial and error. It's going to be feedback. It's going to be iteration. One of the things that we're experimenting with my team is where do we find all of the algorithmic steps in the process, put a bounty on those first, and build the automations and the macros and the different pieces using AI in order to help us with the building. And when I say using AI, from our standpoint, the first thing that we're doing is using the ability to partner with a ChatGPT or Claude to help us build the code that's required to build that automation. I don't hire pricing guys because they're capable at coding, and if I go to IT, I can submit a ticket and hopefully within a few months hear back from somebody on whether or not they have the capacity to help. All of a sudden, this gives us a tool where we can build some of these automations ourselves, and I'm freeing up hours within my team in order to be able to spend more time on the value-added pieces, the critical thinking, the customer tests, the ideation. That's where I want my team spending time, not in managing and jockeying spreadsheets all the way through a convoluted process.
Hey, Doug, Mary, you may take this out in post, but hey, Doug, can you talk a little bit about how your team or how UScellular is adapting AI, or what they're doing, or the lean-in nature of that, or is that kind of off limits?
On the lean-in nature?
Oh, just on the pricing part?
One of two things. I could have either asked, are you using AI in order to adopt pricing? That felt too sensitive. So I was trying to take more broadly for UScellular and what they're doing to make sure that you as an employee and the rest of the team, everybody you work around, are they really adopting AI? just what's the corporate stance on? Can you do that, or is that off limits?
No, I mean, we can talk about it for a second.
Here, let me give you let me give you a
Yeah.
legit question. That I want to make sure I could ask it before. Okay. Hey, Doug, what are you doing to, what's a company, like UScellular or other, what are they doing to really help employees get smart? I mean, you just referenced, a use of ChatGPT. I think everybody's really moving down that path. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast that thing's growing. It's unbelievable how fast it grew in the last quarter. I mean, just extraordinary revenue growth for them. So the world's lit up with the thing. Is the company helping employees get there and kind of understand and apply some of these tools, do you think? Or is it still really complicated for corporations to go after that?
I think it's immensely complicated for corporations to go after that. UScellular broadly, they have enabled and empowered associates to really do self-led projects to utilize platforms like ChatGPT, like Claude, in order to find applications that benefit us both personally and to the extent possible professionally. The challenge that we run into is there's an element of fear around what happens with the data that we're plugging into the system. We don't have a closed environment that we can use to run our own queries and to operate within UScellular data. So there's some pretty hard and fast rules around what it is that we can ultimately post, where I'm finding the thought leaders within our walls are the ones that are really figuring out, okay, how do I use within the publicly available data, whether it's building tools that I can bring back in-house, or is it queries using more publicly available information? We definitely see it more from a bottoms-up perspective in UScellular versus a top-down mandate.
Got it. Well, I'm super interested in the pricing one because it sounds like what you did was you used ChatGPT and other tools. I imagine you have either an enterprise edition or the corporate account where you pay $10 extra a month and keeps the data out of the training set, and you're able to basically. Going back to Goldratt's theory of consent, you're able to remove some of those bottlenecks that were slowing you down. You're able to increase throughput. Talk to me a bit more about how that cycle is working. Is that now part of the automatic process as you're doing pricing and promotions to use AI to help streamline the analysis and the feedback process that you're describing?
That's the vision. The vision is ultimately to automate as much of the non-value added process as possible in order to make sure that we're operating within company guidelines, to make sure that we are trying to figure out how best to frame this.
Is there a gap between the practice and the vision? Is that what you're saying?
I would say we're in the building blocks phases. So we're in the early phases where having conversations within the team, we are building the automations around specific areas where we're doing work algorithmically. For example, we have a sizing process where if there is a new phone promotion, whether it's say a free iPhone with X amount of months of service, we're able to look at, based on what time that we're running it, based off of different forecasts of the business, we can estimate how much PSE there's going to be. Right now, that's a fairly manual process where we have to pull together data from multiple spreadsheets. You're going to have to ultimately build something from scratch each time. To the extent that it's possible, we're starting to build some of those automations where we know where the files are, we know where the data is, we can pull it all into one place, and then very quickly just press a button and be able to see what that size is.
So these are kind of mini workflows, mini agents that are doing sets of tasks that have been a bit tedious with data wrangling and spreadsheet joins and so forth.
Yeah,
that's your core.
And I'll tell you, my aha moment on this, I run some subscriber reporting, so every week it's one of those where I was spending hour and a half pulling together from multiple reports that we get from our sales organization, from our data science organization, and I was just pulling these reports together into an Excel spreadsheet. Again, lots of copying, lots of pasting. I don't have an experience in coding. I don't have an experience from an Excel standpoint. I'm reasonably good in Excel, but it's one of those where I got onto ChatGPT and I asked for some fairly basic functions, just common language. Help me understand what's possible. Help me understand, can I automate this? And just step by step, it's by getting feedback. What can I bring over? What can I copy? What can I paste? And within, it was about 4 hours of back and forth on ChatGPT, I was able to automate the whole process down to a single button that's coded on the spreadsheet. You press a button and suddenly this hour-and-a-half process is taking place in 30 seconds. Now,
And you're doing
the
that
fact
every week?
what's that?
You're doing that every day or every week?
That's every week, yeah. And in
Wow.
fact, because I was spending an hour and a half, it was a weekly report. At any given moment now, if I want to have a conversation around the subscriber results, I'm able to make this Excel spreadsheet again in 30 seconds. So it's removing a big barrier to entry for me from this data.
So 4 hours of your time saves 70 hours for the year.
Exactly. And again, I'm not a coder.
That's a good. Listen. I'm not a math guy like Rex is, but I think that's a good deal.
I was probably exaggerating down on the downside to make it a more conservative estimate too. Because like you said, you now instead of just running it weekly, you might run at any point in time where somebody has a question. So now it's on demand because it only takes you a few seconds to get the data back. When you build on those kind of transformations and think about organizationally, what companies need to do to make that easier for more people to do what you're doing, what do you think's next? Or what do you want to see an organization do to help make AI easier to adopt and scale across an organization?
I think the biggest thing is giving people a sense of imagination. I will tell you, that was a fairly simple use case. Again, it's a weekly report, simple automation. Fairly straightforward in terms of the cost benefit there. But I will tell you the piece that doesn't come out in the math is the unlocking of my imagination. Again, I am not a coder, but this full workflow I built with ChatGPT through Visual Basic, and now I've got basically a superpower in my hands. And I can look at that and say, all right, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of solvable problems for myself personally and for my team to be able to tackle. And so in literally a moment from starting that project to completion, I became an evangelist for every single person on my team to say, you need to be looking at this. And if you think you're not a coder, you're talking to somebody who's probably inferior to you. And so how do you start to create that imagination of what's possible? What are the problems that can be solved? What are the tools that are out there and available? I talked with a colleague of mine before I ran the experiment, guy that I went to my master's course with. He's an entrepreneur in the medical technology space. And he has built an entire hospital administration platform using large language models to help with the coding work. And by doing so, he is a small company, has basically done the lift that would normally require a large development team multiple months to be able to get fairly simple deliverables out. He's turning stuff around in days, if not weeks, as a much smaller team. Just kind of begs the question of why not us? Why not here? Why not now? And how do we start to put the bounties on those problems and say, we don't need the development team in order to have a fairly sophisticated solution set?
I like that question. Yeah. Why not us? Why not here? Why not now? When you tackle that, in my organization, what I've done is I did a first round. First of all, I make everyone take the AI training that Greg offers through MMA Global. And then we follow up with a hackathon, which is, okay, you guys need to come up with ideas. The first hackathon, we had, I think, 12 or 13 teams, so about 50 some odd people participated in it out of 250. This next one that will go, Greg, we have a training in May, so we'll do the next one following that. But I am starting to keep track of the names of who participated and who didn't, because I know most organizations, if we are facing economic downturn, which we may, given the economic bumps in the road and cycles that happen, and there's a reduction in force, I don't think it's going to be the people who did the AI hackathons. What do you think?
I don't think so either. It's interesting. As I think about the way that AI is going to play out in corporate, I see it as multiplying the strategy, right? It's a multiplying force as a tool rather than a solution in and of itself. So as we think about the individuals and impacts, right, to the extent that people are wired as doers, I think it's going to give them an opportunity to be more thinkers. And people wired as thinkers are suddenly going to have a tool that enables them to do more and be less dependent on others. But overall, I think you're going to see a shift toward more complete marketers at the end of the day, because we have to be able to identify problems, we have to be able to identify potential solutions, and then ultimately see those through execution. There's not going to be room anymore for people that are specializing on one or the other, because we have this tool that amplifies individual efforts. So to your point, Rex, right? Like if we want to make ourselves safe in a tempestuous environment, right? The economy shifting up and down. I think the complete marketers that are able to use AI as a self-complement are absolutely going to be in a better place to weather the storm.
Yeah, and Greg, in your organization, you're requiring, I mean, you're having the hackathons and you're making people present at your company meetings. I mean, share a little bit.
Stuff. Yeah, no. I've really tried to push the concept, and I think we're about to escalate, Rex. I don't even think I've told you this, but I think I found, in fact, I've got a meeting set for you and I this week around sort of applying agents to marketing, which I found an interesting company. I just kind of want you to evaluate it. But you're right. I think we did good. I mean, first off, we had AI August. I don't know, just because it was two A's together.
Alliteration.
Then we recently had AI April, so I'll just keep it going. That's how clever we are. But you're right. But it had very specific requirements. People had to build a GPT. That was the first one. I think that was AI August. And then the more recent one is that we set up a whole gamification where people could earn points and sort of awards and blah 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 if they completed a series of sort of things that because we've got Alec here on the team who's really leading the charge. Yeah, I'm really going to push it. I want to see how far we can go. I'm very enamored by this concept. There was a bunch of news in LinkedIn this week, in fact, about companies with tens of millions of dollars of revenue and 5 employees. Yeah. And you take like a guy like Shelley Palmer's come out and said, listen, we're inevitably going to face the first $1 billion company built by one person. I mean,
that's been Sam Altman's claim as a measure, a milestone.
A milestone, right? So it's kind of inevitable. And even listen, we're not that far. I mean, Twitch I think was 23 people, and they sold that thing for a couple $1 billion. So I mean, I think it's all doable and possible in today's world. So I don't know. I'd like to really turn the MMA on its head to go do that. And I have a little more latitude than a big corporation does to do that.
Yeah. Well, Doug, back to you. I mean, one thing, the other part of our conversation that was really interesting beyond just trying to do the boots on the ground, actually building AI, moving the organization, trying to do things in your own life, and then with your team members, getting them to do it as well. The other thing that you said that was pretty interesting to me is we were talking about the AI personalization lift, and I think the optimization at that time was to a website event. And, which is fine. I mean, a lot of people search for information before buying their phone on a website. That's a key part of it. But you made the observation that strategically we need to make sure the AI is optimizing towards really the broader goal of what we have, which is more along the lifetime value. Maybe there's a connection between the brand equity and the behavior. How do you think, again, Goldratt's book was, number one, that we should be looking at the goal and saying what are the bottlenecks we need to remove, and how do we increase throughput to the goal? What's your equivalent when you think about with your business right now? Do you feel like you have the right objective function for AI to optimize? And if not, how do you begin to get to that data signal that the AI can optimize towards?
Ultimately, from a wireless standpoint, right, as we think about what the goal is, we want to have we want to have a customer base that is growing, healthy, and full of people that want to pay us month over month for the service that we offer. That would be how I would paraphrase our goal. Mm-hmm. And as you think about different AI applications, I think it's really important to make sure that anything that we are experimenting with, we are framing within that lens. So when we run an AI personalization study or a trial like we did with Claritas, what we're ultimately trying to do at the end of the day is not just drive more clicks, right? Like clicks are a symptom. That's a leading indicator. What we're really trying to accomplish with that is put the right product in front of the right person, and so that they are making a willful decision that they're glad they made at the end of the day. Where I think we have to be cautious is if we don't have the fundamental understanding of that product market match, right? What is that person? What is that product that's going to ultimately fit? You could end up with some optimizations that aren't really optimal, so to speak. A cautionary tale that I've been watching very closely is, I don't know if you guys have been watching what's been going on with Starbucks over the past year. They've got the new CEO, Brian Nichols.
They got a new CEO, right? They're going to try.
Yeah.
And don't forget they're writing on the cups now again.
That's right.
That was that was big news. Really big
Yeah.
news. They're writing on the cups, yeah.
It's part of his bigger Back to Starbucks campaign. And this one's been fascinating for me to watch, because as I look at Starbucks over the past few years, it's actually kind of a personal story. I took my 7-year-old daughter on a date for her birthday, and just to make her feel big and proud and bold, I took her to Starbucks. I'm going to get you a pink drink. We're going to sit down inside. We're going to enjoy a few minutes together on a date. And we got in there. I stood at the counter. I kid you not. I mean, it was 7 or 8 minutes standing at a counter. Behind the counter is full of baristas running all over the place. And it was probably 3 minutes before they even came over and greeted me. I'm the only person in the whole store, right? They're rushing to manage all the drive-through orders, all the takeout orders. Sit down inside, on a hardback chair, less comfortable than an early 2000s McDonald's. I mean, it was just an awful experience, and it was not at all what I remembered Starbucks to be. As you look at where they went, at the end of the day, right? I mean, they were optimizing. They were optimizing to the average ticket size. They were optimizing to throughput. They were optimizing to productivity of individual baristas. But they were also missing out on the original vision of Schultz being a third place, the interactions between the barista and the customer. And I think you're seeing Brian Nichols trying to bring some of that back. That's when I think about, from a wireless opportunity and optimization, where are the real opportunities for us to optimize. We'd be very cautious that we're not optimizing for numbers that at the end of the day don't represent what it is that we're really trying to accomplish. And that's satisfied customers.
Yeah, I think your key point is when you're talking about what people that were happy to pay you month over month, the happy to pay you part, is a net promoter score, some type of score of satisfaction or some type of prediction of satisfaction. And a lot of times that brand equity measure isn't part of the overall equations that are being optimized. So one of the big things that struck me in our conversation was that you were one of the few people that I've heard take a step back and say, okay, great AI can optimize, but what is it optimizing towards? And are we sure that that's tuned to the right thing? And Greg, you had a similar conversation too with the registrations when you're using the same type of technologies. You're like, okay, we're optimizing towards a customer journey to ultimately get people to buy a ticket to the possible event in Miami. And it was interesting because no one had really looked at the journey and said, well, exactly where are the tags and what's firing, and are we sure that that's pulling the right thing that we care about? So it's it's a really important topic for people to think about deeply, which is you have to take a step back and make sure that you begin to tie together the signals in a way that will train AI. And I think maybe both of you know this, but there's something called reward hacking, which AI does. Have you guys heard this term?
No, what's this? I haven't heard that, Rex.
Oh, well, so it comes from some interesting early research that was done where you'd have AI play video games, and the reward function is really easy. It's points on the video game thing. Well, what it found in some of the video games was that it was better for, in certain scenarios, that there was more points earned early on for the AI just to commit suicide, kill off the character and start over, because there'd be easier points to get in the beginning. And so it learned all these interesting weird tweaks to where you're like, that's not how to play the game. But it was how to play the game if you give it the wrong reward function. So yeah, beware of reward hacks in marketing too.
Oh my goodness. Oh, geez. Now we have another whole thing to worry about, Rex. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So on that one, I mean, how do you begin to move your organization towards a kind of a more unified measure? I imagine you have a customer sat measure, you have recurring revenue, you have these silos of different measures. One of the big things that Greg and I have been working on is how to unify some of these in a way that you could bring to a CFO and they would understand the metric. But it seems like it applies quite well to AI optimization. How are you thinking about it, Doug?
It's funny. I'm almost going a slightly different way with it. I think we have to marry those quantitative measures with a vision, a story that ties it all together. As I'm thinking about how this plays out, I think we're about to come up on a major management crisis where we have been dedicating teams and efforts toward digitization and quantification of every element of our business. But one of the things that's hidden underneath that is because everything has been driven primarily by human effort up to this point, you've got some constraints in the system where just checkpoints, limitations in terms of how fast people can make decisions, how much data people can process. And so things naturally get prioritized, things naturally get put in a certain order. And as a result, I think some of that shakes out into some checkpoints where bad decisions are rolled back faster or sooner than they're able to have a major impact. Imagine having 100 interns working for you, right? Like you tell those interns what to do, they'll go do exactly what you said. And just like the reward hacking you were mentioning, Rex, right? You'll realize very quickly the flaw in what you told them what to do when you go do that. Now, I think from a professional standpoint, you get a lot of latitude in terms of the empowerment and direction you provide people and their ability to think objectively and bring back real value. But you suddenly empower those individuals with AI tools and some of the horsepower that's going to be available here in today and in the very near future. I think you're going to run into some situations where executives are realizing that without casting a clear vision, without casting that vision of what the goal ultimately is, you're going to start to see point optimizations that are running awry, right? I mean, that are running amok. Starting to see, again, one example is from a content generation standpoint. I've been talking with a handful of companies around using AI for content generation, and one of the questions I'm asking myself is, do my customers want more content from me? Right? Is that ultimately what they're buying from me? Is that ultimately what they're engaging from me? And what is content that's actually value added to the customer at the end of the day? And if my job as a middle and a full manager is to produce content, and I suddenly have a tool that allows me to triple, quadruple, quintuple the amount of content I'm putting out without growing my team, in fact even shrinking my team, right? You can see where suddenly you could flood the market with content that isn't really valuable, right? It's not one of the constraints at the end of the day, and what's making us successful. Now, multiply that across dozens of functions across the marketing team, and hundreds of functions across the entire business. And how do you manage an environment where even a simple misapplied direction could spiral into fairly large ramifications? It's a very different way to think about business. I think there's going to be consequences to the vision that's cast, consequences to the vision that's not cast. And ultimately, we have to have that story that allows customers to see themselves in the big picture. And from there, I think you can start to parse that back into what are those key metrics, what are those functions, what is the next step that we need to be optimizing to.
Yeah, that's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
And I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, rate, and review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, or check us out on YouTube. You can get transcripts and more information on our website, decodingaiformarketing.com. And to learn more about MMA and membership options, go to MMAglobal.com. Thanks for listening.